Hi, and welcome to My Yoga Living. I am so excited to be chatting with Amanda Cagle, who is our amazing empowering birth class teacher and my yoga teacher. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So, we are going to talk about a lot of things. The one thing that Amanda would tell every mama if she could before they have to go get baby out. But first, we're going to talk about really the reasons why we might want to take the time to prepare for birth. It's a natural process, and a lot of us kind of say, "Well, it'll all unfold as it should." So I'm excited to hear Amanda's thoughts about that. But first, let's just hear Amanda, tell us how you got into this realm and what you love about it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so much. Um, so the way I got into birth work, which is what I call it, I'm a doula and a childbirth educator and a lot of other things, including a prenatal yoga teacher. And so the way I kind of found myself in this realm of work is I was volunteering at a homeless shelter for pregnant women. So I was working with single moms mostly, with a couple partners here and there being involved. And one day, one of the clients at the shelter asked me to be at her birth, and I knew nothing about this whole world. And so we just learned together for about 6 months. We prepared every week, just read some stuff and researched and talked about her options in birth, and then went to her birth and fell in love with it. So I actually changed career paths mid-college because of this experience, and I haven't looked back since. So childbirth education has been a big part of my practice now. I work with groups in person. I work in private settings with families one-on-one or one-on-two, especially for families who, don't have the schedule to go into a group class long-term. And now I'm happy to be doing these online classes with Ma Yoga.
That's wonderful. I'm happy to have you. And are they mostly for people who want to give birth naturally or
Great question. So my philosophy when taking a birth class, especially if it's your first time birther that we're talking about, is really that it's all about preparing yourself for all of the different paths that birth can take, and to help ourselves figure out how we cope best with challenging moments. And challenging moments can come up in any type of birth, whether it be a planned epidural, and the epidural has not come at the right time, or it doesn't take effect at the time that we thought. Or it be a mama who has decided to have a home birth. It doesn't actually end up being a home birth. Maybe she has a need to have a cesarean at the end of the day. Or maybe it's the beautiful home birth experience on paper that she planned for, but it doesn't feel exactly like what she planned for to begin with. So my job as a childbirth educator and my number one goal is to help families prepare for all of the different paths that birth can take, whether we have control over those little pathways or not.
and what about if it's a hospital birth and someone's planning to have an epidural in the parking lot?
I love that.
Get out of a class like this.
Oh, so I love that. So I think it's really important for families to understand what to expect in the process, whether they want the epidural or not. And especially in cases where we're talking about working in a hospital setting, birth hasn't been in the hospital setting for very long in human history. And so it's really a different shift that we've taken in our culture, a different place that we birth around different people we don't know per se, and doctors that we have only maybe met in passing, potentially being at our births. So understanding the medical technology, the verbiage that your providers will use around you during birth, understanding your rights in the hospital and what you're actually allowed to do and what you maybe have been told are different things. So understanding all of the different realms there and how it compares. So one of the things I will say is a lot of times I do have clients who come into a birth class with me and have a set plan in mind for their birth experience. And then along the way realize that maybe the people that they've chosen to be a part of their birth experience or the place that they've chosen to give birth maybe aren't actually in alignment with their own values and their own wishes for their body and their baby and their birth. And that's actually my number one recommendation for why to take a class, is to figure out where your values lie along the course of giving birth and becoming a parent, so that you can actually choose a team and choose a birthplace that fit your needs and your life for your family.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I mean, and from the yoga perspective, of course, everything, there's a potential for a beautiful, empowered, connected experience, no matter where you are, no matter what happens. I know for me, what ended up being the best decision and the most meaningful one was to be in a hospital. I found one that worked for me that had midwives, but ultimately that was absolutely that was a gift. And so, yeah, so I love that what you're saying is really, it's about finding out what is going to work for you and your family best, and that there isn't one right way.
Yeah, we often talk about with our clients this idea that, it's your baby and your life, and no one else goes home with you and your baby, right? So the nurses, your midwife, whoever it may be, even your doula, none of them go home having had the experience of being you in your birth and having the experience of becoming a parent to your baby. So it really is this amazingly unique experience and this unique time of life where we have this opportunity to expand and to grow and to learn about ourselves. And it's just it's a beautiful process overall.
And what are some of those choices that people will have to make, other than where, like once things get going, that, maybe having had the experience of your class will make things easier and maybe make things go in a more easeful direction?
Yeah, so some of the decisions that will have to be made, who you want to be at your birth, that's a really, really big one. Whether you want your partner, your intimate partners there, and what role they'll actually play while they're in your experience in birth. Whether you want family members there, who your provider is, can make a lot of difference in the birth experience. So like you're talking about, there are midwives in hospitals now, and a lot of people don't even realize that that's an option in their own communities. Or choosing an OB who's in a single practice versus choosing an OB who has a lot of backup OBs with them. These little decisions and the whys behind them can make a big difference in how you're treated on the day of and how you interact with your providers and your support people, right? So in our class, we'll be focusing on how to build a supportive birth team so that the experience is as lovely and as smooth as possible. And so that you actually are bonded with the people who are in your environment during this amazing transformative experience.
So important. I know. And for me, also just that knowing that I had really consciously made those choices made all the difference as well. Even if things don't go as planned, just that feeling that I was present and aware and sort of educated and making the best choice I could make makes it feel like a really successful birth. So we've got our birth team. What about once things get going? Is there anything in your course that helps once things are happening?
Yeah. So we spent a lot of time on coping skills in the class, on how to figure out what coping skills actually work for you, how to practice them effectively so that when you're in the moment, you can actually hearken back to the times when you did practice by yourself or with your partners or with your birth team in presence. And we really talk about all the differences in options at the hospital in terms of medical technology. There's a lot of different medication options. There are a lot of different options for pain relief, including hands-on physical support pain relief options. So we do talk a lot about that. We're going to be going over lots of different yummy birth positions. So positions for comfort, positions for progress in labor if things are moving slower than you like them to move, positions for intimacy between partners, pushing. We'll be talking a lot about pushing positions and options in the hospital, options out of hospital births, what pushing can look like versus what it seems to look like in the media can be a lot different. We'll also be talking about some medical technology in the terms of interventions and when interventions are necessary, how to figure out if they're necessary for your birth, which is something that a lot of people struggle with in the moment, is trying to figure out how to communicate with their providers to know whether or not they need something versus it's just an option that they could use. Right?
And then, of course, we have to get baby home. So does this course actually include anything to help us prepare for that?
does. We'll be talking about breastfeeding quite a bit. I am a lactation counselor and educator in my community. So we'll be talking about breastfeeding and how to make that work in your life if that's your goal or your intention is to breastfeed longer term. We'll talk about making that work in your actual life, your day-to-day, and not just in a conceptual manner. We'll be talking about coming into your own as a parent, which is like this next huge step that people often forget is going to happen right after birth. So not only has mom just given birth, right, which is this huge experience, then she has to quickly transition into becoming mom or birther that has become parent, right? So there's this huge transition after this huge event, and oftentimes it gets skipped over in classes or it gets skipped over in books altogether. A lot of like birth books don't really talk about parenting in the first weeks or months after birth. We'll be talking about how to make that transition as smooth as possible, how to keep intimacy alive and well in your relationships with your intimate partners and your family members, and also how to find yourself in that process, because there is a little bit of a losing yourself that happens when you're going into a birth experience, and you kind of have to find this new self that is digging her way through the experience of becoming a parent. And it can be really beautiful and really lovely, and it can also be really challenging. So we're going to talk pretty realistically about how to cope after birth as well as how to cope during labor itself.
Yeah, and I find that if people know who to turn to, and they'll be part of this community then, right? And if they have felt nurtured and supported and guided and inspired through that whole experience, then they can get through those challenges. And that the self that we find after it all often is more connected to who we really are, like more aware of what we're capable of and what our potential is. And you know, that's why I just love working in this arena so much, that, you know, birth is like this doorway. And if we actually reach out and if we kind of step into that more feminine side of ourselves that knows that we're better together, right? That you know,
we have support.
Yeah, there's support out there. And when we are kind of held in a container through the experience, that, you know, if we actually take the time to do that, then it's like it gives us this opportunity to step back and take a look at our lives and even kind of adjust our path based on what we know now about who we are. I mean, there's just so much there that we can learn if we come into it consciously. So I'm just so excited for the mamas who get to be with you and really dive deep. And so what would be the one thing that you would tell every mom to be if you could?
So it would be to figure out where you land on the spectrum of choices as early as possible, so that you can really set up your birth experience and your parenting, your postpartum experience, in alignment with the people around you. So something that often happens in birth and in parenting, especially moving forward as a mother in our culture, is this idea that we are supposed to do everything alone and be really isolated. And it's a real problem in our culture and around the world at this point. It's a real problem that we're seeing in family dynamics, is this isolation factor. So my goal is always to help families and mothers in particular is to try to figure out who's on your team, what role do they play, how are they in alignment with your values as a human being and as a parent, and as somebody who's going through this amazing transformative experience. So alignment is my number one goal.
So beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be offering our Empowering Birth class together. And if you're listening and you would like to join us, just go to myyogaliVing.com and go up to courses and select the Empowering Birth class. And we look forward to seeing you there. Also, you can grab the outline on the page if you want to get more in-depth information about what we're offering. And just check out the date on the page, and we'll see you there. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you. I'm so excited to see you.
Bye.